Welcome everyone to this special ICODR member meeting as part of Cyber Week 2022. Hopefully you were able to enjoy some of the sessions yesterday. We had some amazing platform demos from Resolution in Linea, from Jupitus, which is a very exciting ODR company out of India, from the Civil Resolution Tribunal. We also had presentations from Dan Rainey about his book, The Fourth Party, the new Fourth Party book, and which we already had as an ICODR member meeting, but also from Ethan Catch talking about healthcare disputes, and Nico talking about women's empowerment through informal chains in Colombia. So I can't believe that that's day one. I mean, that's like a whole Cyber Week in past years had that much content. Now we're only on day two, and we have my very good friend Gary here to present his amazing platform, ADR Notable, which I think is the best platform in the world for individual and small firm mediators trying to manage their practice online. So I think you're going to be really, really impressed with this platform. Gary and I, we were lucky enough to present together at the ODR Forum in Dublin that Brian hosted just a little while ago. But that wasn't about ADR Notable at all. And I remember thinking, this is such a missed opportunity. You know, we should have had Gary show off his amazing platform. So we're going to rectify that today on this ICODR member meeting. So thank you for joining. Can I ask if mute yourselves if you're not Gary? I'm going to do the same thing in a second. And then when we open up for conversations after Gary's demo is done, then you can unmute yourself. But that'll make sure that the Zoom stays focused on his presentation. So with that, Gary, let me hand it over to you. Why don't you say a little bit about your background before you dive in? Like, how did you get just founding ADR Notable, and what was your experience, all of that? I think people would really like.
So I'm a longtime practicing attorney, graduated from University of Chicago Law School in '84, was in private practice and went, basically doing litigation for the first few years. And then I went in-house and worked primarily in the airline industry. So I worked for American Airlines for 9 years, again, starting out supporting litigation from the in-house perspective, and then antitrust work, and then 2 years in the government affairs office. Then in 2000, the five big airlines in the United States created a travel website to try and, frankly, lower the cost of their distribution in competition with the two big guys, Expedia and Travelocity. And I was the general counsel for that startup called Orbitz. Then I did that. We grew up, we got through antitrust review, we went public, and then we were sold at a tender offer. Following that, I did a technology startup company with some colleagues around the credit card fraud detection process we used at Orbitz. And now it's spun off in an independent company. That did well, and we sold that to American Express after a few years, and I went back into the airline industry as the general counsel for the Global Trade Association for airlines called IATA, International Air Transport Association, based in Montreal and Geneva. So I kind of lived the vagabond life for about 3 years and then retired, but couldn't convince my college professor's spouse to retire. So I had to find something else to do. And I started talking with the faculty at Ohio State University Law School. We live in Central Ohio. My wife's at Kenyon College, for those of you who know small liberal arts schools. And the faculty at OSU was just unbelievable. They're tremendous, talented, knowledgeable people. At some point, they convinced me, and we started out with doing the airline industry as a business case for dispute resolution, system design. And then they convinced me to take a 3-day short course sort of training in mediation taught by Professor Josh Stuhlberg. And I went through that, and I sort of graduated and laughed and said, okay, that was really interesting and helpful. And I'm pretty sure I am not temperamentally well suited to be a mediator. I have a strong personality. I move toward, solutions too rapidly. I have subsequently taken the full 40-hour course, got exactly that feedback from the people watching me do my mock mediation. So the decision was that I thought this was important. I think, after an in-house career looking at the US system of litigation, and frankly, global systems of litigation in some components, it just is absurd to think that that is the first choice of dispute resolution for so many commercial matters, and that you watch these things go for a year and a half, 2 years or longer, of pre-trial discovery and motion practice. And then when the push came to shove and people really were faced with a jury or a judge making a decision in the case, they settled anyway. Rarely having learned anything material in the 2 years, other than that litigation is expensive. They probably learned that the hard way. But so I just became a complete convert as a consequence of being an in-house lawyer, and particularly when I was in the airline industry, watching members of my own trade association fight with one another, or fight with vendors that they were married to for 50 years, because when you're an airline and you bought 100 airplanes from Boeing, and each one of them lasts 30 years, you're not going anywhere. That relationship has to remain intact. So I became a strong believer in ADR, in ADR and ADR techniques, and thought that the best way I could contribute was to build software that supported the process, instead of actually becoming a mediator myself. So that's kind of how we got there. And I worked the first versions of ADR Notable, the company I founded to do this, were based at least loosely on the book Middle Voice by Professor Leela Love and Professor Josh Schoolberg, and their methodologies and some of their rubrics for remembering how to do this. So anyway, that's the background. And let's see if I can share my screen. Let's see here. That's that one. Okay, so you should be seeing an intro slide, I hope, everybody, right? Okay, so thanks, thanks, Colin, for thinking of me and inviting me to do this presentation. And, welcome to the members of the International Council for Online Dispute Resolution. I'm pleased to be able to take this time and show you what we've created with my sort of small team at ADR Notable. I want to start a little bit by, so first of all, as Colin mentioned, what ADR Notable is, what it's intended to be, is the basic platform from which every mediator can work, whether they're an individual mediator, sole practitioner, small firm practice, and even into larger firms. We have tools that help both on the case administration side and on the firm administration side. But the goal is just to support that service provider, that practitioner. And the way we thought about this as we got into it is, there is this cloud of soft skills that every mediator has to keep in their mind at all times. And it's, all these things, all these talents, skills, abilities, tactics, techniques, strategies. I mean, all of these are essential, and they all have to be first and foremost in the mind of the mediator. But at the same time, there are what I think of as hard skills or process steps that also have to be, you can't really do this job without stepping through each of these, at least these fundamental steps. So let's start with the participants. I mean, you need to know who is involved. That often means not just the parties, but people who surround the parties. So there may be lawyers involved, or insurance companies, or support people, or in a family matter, there's the principals, the parents probably, and there may be children. And you need some place to make sure that you as the mediator, know who's involved, who's being affected by this. And there may be what we refer to even as unaffiliated parties. Let's say there's an outside expert who isn't really associated with either party from a legal outcome standpoint, but is there to provide assistance or help in the process. I mean, the example we used when we were doing this was just an example case we made up, was a shopping mall that's coming into a neighborhood where it's really not welcome. And our unaffiliated party who attended our mock mediation session was the architect. And he was there to provide information about costs of changes were being made to the design or the facade or whatever. So you need to track, like I said, not just the parties, but who else is in the room. You need to keep them associated if they are linked to a party, or disassociated if they're not. Next step in the process is just gathering information. You need to know the context and the scope of what the debate is going to be about. What is the conflict? You may need to know about constraints and maybe some reality aspects as well. Next is, you try and move the parties to an actual slightly more formal definition of the issues. And this is, I put issues or interest, because as we all know, there are often stated issues, but lurking behind those stated issues, there are more fundamental interests of the parties, and you often need to know both. And when you've explored that thoroughly, then you can move to trying to generate options, potential solutions, proposals, whatever you want to call those, but you need now to start taking those next steps. And as the mediator, you often are the person who is kind of in the center of this, trying to choreograph this and keep track of that process. And it can be a process, right? I mean, there can be opening positions, and they migrate, they move, there are counter proposals and so forth. And you'll see in our software, we try to accommodate that as well. Then when you get agreements, hopefully, between the parties, then there's some form of documentation is usually recommended. Maybe the mediator is just doing an informal, non-binding summary, or maybe the mediator is trying to generate definitive documents. It depends on the matter and the jurisdiction and so forth. So, again, this is a hard skill or an administrative task that can be supported. And then last, there's follow-up, and that can be lots of things in this. There can be the billing component, getting paid. Maybe you did that up front, maybe you do it invoice at the conclusion of the matter, maybe both. There may be decisions about record keeping or not, affirmatively not, and there may be some data compilation work that you want to do. So this is what we saw when we analyzed the market, and you end up, and these are sort of those additional steps I was talking about: invoicing and payment, record retention enforcement, data gathering, accountability and reporting in some contexts, and there's probably some business intelligence or customer resource management components, in addition to the specific staircase that I just showed you for steps in a specific case. So, this is our image of the typical mediator, is they're trying to keep all of these soft skills, foremost in their minds while they're dealing with the parties. But in the background, or with equal weight, is all of these hardcore practical steps that they need to also keep in mind. So what we saw was this opportunity for the partnership of technology on one hand and human skills on the other. Clearly, technology can help. I mean, we have tools that we use all the time that we know, and the fact that you're from the organization you're from, you've all learned that the online capabilities of communication, for instance, is a tool in the toolbox. But it's not the only one. Obviously, we can go further than just sort of a word processing and the Zoom or other teleconference technology. The key in my mind and in our minds was to think hard about what things technology does well and what things are really uniquely human. So, I mean, when we think of technology, we think of things like word processing, electronic transfer of data, whether that's voice or video or all of the above. Technology can help us manage processes better than a human brain can remember and follow a set of steps. Record keeping, including finding and accessing large volumes of information. Clearly, computers help there. Compilation of data or statistics, and organization or visualization of information. The ability for a computer to be very flexible in moving information from place to place, forging relationships between two pieces of information, and managing those. Once you write something down on a yellow legal pad, that's the only spot it's going to be. When you put it into a computer, that's not true. You can actually move it around. You can resequence lists of things. You can associate one piece of information with another and keep it organized. On the human side, though, look, computers, software is not really quite ready for managing complex interpersonal communications. Some might argue it's getting close. I think there was a story a couple months ago about one of the software engineers at Google believing that their a natural language processing system had become sentient, which caused all kinds of furor in the industry for a little while. Eventually, it was kind of most experts saying no, it sounds sentient, but it's just mimicking responses that are sort of programmed, that have been built into programming. But the fact that it was even close suggests that maybe computers aren't that far off from being able to mimic complex interpersonal communication. But going further, application of social norms and values, I mean, that's just not something that's yet within the scope of automation. Displaying empathy in any other way than programmed mimicry of empathetic voice or word choice is the best, is something that a computer can only mimic. Persuasion and consensus building, I don't think there's anywhere close to that. And creativity, computers are still not independently creative in a useful way. So you sort of draw these maps and you say, okay, so what are we going to do here? And I thought this quote really summed up kind of the perspective that the team at ADR Notable took, which is that technology itself is certainly not an end in itself. What you're trying to create is a better experience when the person using your technology is delivering a set of services to their clients. So I'm cautious, always cautious about how far we should be extending technology at the moment. And in the context of dispute resolution, I think software is at best a tool in the hands of a skilled artisan. It is not the end to itself. And we have to keep our focus when we create software on the service that is actually being provided at the end of this chain, and that's the dispute resolution services themselves. So again, the delivery of these services is a combination of hard and soft skills in a really complex environment. And that's the focus that we took. So now I'm going to switch and show you some screenshots, and there's a little bit of motion in some of these, but I'm going to start with the basics again. I mean, this is the dashboard. This is where you land when you log in. And at the top is all of your cases. And the cases you can expand that list, as you can see, with the indicators of numbers and so forth, that you can make the list as long as you want. There are also filters and sorting capabilities. So right now, for instance, this display is filtered to is set to filter out any cases that have been completed. So you're seeing just some example cases over here that are either open or in prospective mode or in intake mode. So prospective is, literally what it sounds like. A lawyer perhaps called you, trying to determine your availability, but hasn't hired you yet. You can track that, and frankly, you could come in on Monday morning, hit the filter to only see your prospective cases, and then follow up on them on first thing every Monday morning, and then change your filter back to go look at the cases that you have that are open and pending. Intake is just what it sounds like. We define that normally as you haven't actually been hired, and you maybe haven't completed your conflicts check yet, but you're in the process of gathering the information necessary to do that. And then open is obvious. And then on the other side, we have different status of closed, closed fully resolved, closed partially resolved, closed unresolved, and then not hired if you were a prospective and went right to the not hired. The rest of the screen, it's a little bit cut off here, but you get the idea. It links to both Gmail or Google Calendar or to Outlook Calendar. There is a checklist reminder window panel that we'll show you a little bit more about that later. And then most of the navigation occurs on the left-hand bar. But to go back to our stair step, the first thing you need to do is identify in these matters your participants. So I'm going to open a mock case. And this is just basic, right? Every case management system can do this. This is your parties. There's party one, there's party two. It includes who's responsible for billing. Here's an affiliate, in this case, the attorney, and the party that the role was just indicated by the cursor there over there in the lawyer. You can put in all the address information. This is very sort of basic steps of just tracking who is who. But the important part here is that we are tracking not just parties, but anyone affiliated with the party. So you can keep that association. You'll see that that association remains throughout the product. So then I want to take just a moment and talk about checklists. So we are, before we go back into our stair step of all the support aspects. So at ADR Notable, we are enormously convinced that checklists are a tool that people should use more often, and we built them right into our system. Just as a reference, you might want to read the book called Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande. It is primarily in the medical field. It bridges over into the legal field to some extent. But as I mentioned at the outset, my background was in the airline industry, and I earned private pilot's license early, years and years ago. And as we all know from TV or whatever, checklists in the cockpit are huge. I mean, they're a huge thing. And that's part of the reason that the airline industry is so remarkably safe, is that it doesn't matter how many times that pilot has flown that aircraft. That pilot starts with a checklist, and the two people in the cockpit go through every step of it and counter check one another to make sure that everything is done correctly. So we have adopted this checklist concept, and initially we adopted it for process controls or process, implementation. So we had in mind, for instance, just making sure that when you intake, you do everything the same way. But our clients rapidly said they wanted to-do lists, task lists that could be created. And then we met a trainer, and we developed the idea of this being your digital memory because it's very accessible. So let me give you some examples here. So going back to the first use of checklists, this is a process checklist. This is like we just made up steps to go through to intake a case. Here, I can give it to you a little bit larger so it's easier to see. So this is just, if you just sat down and said to yourself, what do I want to make sure I do? Every time I open a case, there's no reason for you to try and memorize that. You just put it in a checklist, put it in a tool that makes it available every time you open a new case. And that's what we've built. And you can see in this example, like the third one down, conflict of interest check completed. There's a little note in here. You can add notes. If a waiver is required to complete your conflict of interest check, it instructs you to keep a copy of that in the not to be deleted folder in connection with this case. Down below, standard intake documents, there's some other references, some other notes. You can add, it's a feature of the software, you can add initials. So you literally have somebody committing that the step has been done, and a date on which it's been completed can be added to this record. Next is the to-do list idea. I mean, just, the ability to say, what do I need to remember to do here? So here we go, we'll open it up. From the case, you go up there and you open your checklists in the top right corner. You pull it down, and these can be, you can generate a checklist. You can create a checklist that is a standard form template, and you can open it up, or you can do what we're doing here, which is one that's being created on the fly, ad hoc. So I'm adding an item to a homework assignment in the case for one of the parties, just so I remember. We need this party to give us their vacation plans for 2023 in a parenting case. I'm going to set a due date just so I know I have, when they are expected to do this. And I'm going to save that. The checklists are, you can sort them and reorganize them. So you put the ones that are still need to be done at the top. Now, when I put that date on there, as you remember on my dashboard, I have these checklist reminders that come up every time I log in. So every pending case with an active checklist, if there's something pending on it, it's going to be right up there on my dashboard. The ones in red are overdue. I probably got to clean those up. And here's the one we just added. And if you just logged in the morning and you came in, you click on it, it takes you right to the case. So again, we're trying to streamline the process as much as possible so that it's just all of these administrative tasks that are such kind of a nuisance are easily managed by the mediator in a single piece of software. So the third use of checklists that I mentioned is sort of your digital memory, a way to be inspired by ideas or tactics, techniques you learn from a trainer. So here we have, ways to break a deadlock that maybe you were lectured on that during your training. You grab that, you put it into a checklist. You're in the case, you pull it up with a click, you read it, and you say, yeah, I'm going to try this one. And you could check it off or not check it off, but checking it off to remember that you tried that is probably not a bad idea. You can imagine lots of things that would be useful for that. I love the one about breaking an impasse because it actually was one of the tools that that I saw when I took my 40-hour course with the Colorado Bar Association, and we had 10 ways to break an impasse. And I thought, well, it was buried in a 250-page PDF I got at the end of the course. I'm never going to find it again. It was never going to be usable again if I didn't bring it out of that and put it someplace that made sense. So those are our three uses of checklists. The checklists are process, their checklists are to-do lists, and checklists are your digital memory of your training. Okay, back to our stair step, gathering information. So ADR Notable is it's hosted in the Microsoft Azure cloud, which means it has a high level of security and automatic backup. But it also means, we wanted to develop a way to get documents loaded into the system in a secure manner. So here we have case files. I've created these folders. I want a document from one of the parties. So I'm just going to go over here to request document. I'm going to grab which party I need it from. I'm going to identify which folder I want it to go right into in my files. Excuse me, I'm going to write a little note. And the system is going to create a link that the recipient will use to upload that document. So in just a moment, I'm going to set an expiration date for that link. It is a security issue to have a link that gets inside theoretically inside a portal. So we don't want that to just hang around forever. This note is going to be taken by the system and put on the top of an email that the system itself generates to the party. So that's just the text of the email. I'm going to pick a due date, give them a week or so to do this, and then I'm going to hit the button. And what has now happened in the background is ADR Notable has generated an email, sent it to the party with the text that you identified, and it provides a link. The link will allow the party then to upload documents, and they appear directly in the folder you indicated, and you get a notification on your dashboard that the documents have been received. So the other piece of this is is just the ability to sort of keep the documents. Whoops, hold on. Sorry, that's a repeat. Next one here. There we go. No, I think I'm still showing the same slide. How about that? There we go. Gather information. So communications is the other big part of that's important, obviously, in gathering information. So as I mentioned, we integrate with either Microsoft Outlook or with Gmail. So when you need to send that email, you just, in your case, you just click that send an email at the top of the page, pick the parties you want it to go to, and it generates an email pre-populated with your email addresses from your records. Here's one of the really fun things we've just done. This is scheduling. And let me pause this for just a second because this is, I want to talk a little bit about this for a second. Oops, I accidentally accelerated that. We'll do it again. So this is, let me go back past it, but talk about scheduling. So scheduling is just the bane of most people's existence. And we found an outside company that has a terrific product we'll get to here in just a second. So watch this, schedule a session, pick who you want it to go to. This is everybody in the case except the son of the divorced couple, Alex. It's moved me over to this other product called Calendar Hero. I'm going to mark everyone as essential with that mark as VIP. I'm going to go back. I have predefined different kinds of meetings. So this one is my half-day session, which is defined as 4.5 hours. I'm going to pick a period for the system to look at, update parameters between November 7th and December 9th. And I'm going to just click the button. This is set up as a Zoom link. When I'm ready, I say go. The system has sent an invitation. Now, what's going to happen from here with this product? All those parties have received an invitation. It's going to look at my calendar in real time and show them blocks that comply with my parameters. Between the date set and a block of at least 4.5 hours, I've set buffer times on the front end of it so that I have to be clear for actually 5 hours in order for it to book. When the parties select, as many as they can that fit their schedules, as soon as there is an overlapping selection, the system kicks back in instantly, sends calendar invitations to all of the parties, books it on my calendar. The calendar invitations include the Zoom information, and the system will send reminders prior to the meeting. So it is done. This is unless there is no overlap, in which case we will receive, you'll receive a note and you'll have to expand the window or you'll have to start adjusting it. But if there is an overlapping time in that window, your meeting is already booked and you did nothing other than what you just watched. Okay, moving on to, identifying the issues or the interests. This sounds easy in practice, or sounds easy to say. I know in practice it can be very difficult. Some call it building the agenda, but it often involves trying to get behind that first level of what are claimed to be the interests. So in ADR Notable, we have kind of a workspace we refer to as the note board. This is a highly configurable place to work. So right now I have it just set up as 2 columns. I'm collecting issues. I just added an issue by typing it in that space above and hitting the button. I can resequence them. I can put them in whatever order I want, up and down the channel. And then, on the next, so I have an issue column at the moment and an uncategorized. I can change this around. So let's add back in the proposal column. And I'll show you again how you add a note. You just type it in the space above. And proposals, you try and keep your notes or your issues notes very short, but this may be a little bit longer. I want you to note that you can add that either with keystrokes, as you just saw, the hashtag it identifies it as a proposal, hashtag P, and the @ whose suggestion it was. And there it is. It's in the system. Then I know that went really fast. You'll note underneath it, I now have moved over my note that says health insurance underneath the proposal that Tom is to pay for the health insurance. So now I've got my issues and I've started to take that next step. So to go a little further, this screen now is kind of looking like we've been at this for a while, right? We've been working hard. And there are a few things I want you to point out before I start the movement again. One is this check mark. That indicates that there's been an agreement. It's also indicated by the little thumbs up icon being solid. The two above it, you can see here we have a long proposal about parties agree to a 7-day joint custody schedule, and so forth. And that has drawn in, I've pulled over the issue for residential and school schedule, which is one of our issues. And there's a little chain mark here. I'll show you the purpose of that will be clear in just a moment. Up here next to the thumb, there's a little box and a number. What that indicates is that there's been a counter proposal, so that what you're looking at is the latest proposal on the table, but there's something that precedes that. Now let me start the video here and we can see some of this in motion. So to make sure you know what's been linked, you just click on the chain icon and it tells you what the linkage is in case it gets complicated. Here's how you see the history of the counter proposals. And that can go on forever. That back and forth can go on a long time. I can sort my issues that have not been addressed by a proposal into a different sequence. Now I'm working on a proposal to address that college tuition savings problem. And as I mentioned, these tend to be longer, and there's plenty of space to write them out in some detail. That's typing out, you can see the list of all the parties. The principal parties are starred, and those are the parents and the child. Their affiliate party is kept color-coded, so it's still associated with them. That's why there's the green is the attorney for Bess, the blue is the attorney for Tom. And then we have our categories are in the top above that. So we can associate this with someone making the proposal, and then drag and drop that college tuition savings on top of it. We accept it, it gets a check mark, and the issue gets a check mark as well, so that over there in your issues column, you're keeping good score. So now you can see we've got everything except school events that have been agreed to, because all of them have a check mark next to them. And if you could scroll down, there's a static screen, so I can't really do that. You would see that we have an agreement on all of them. A couple of them had a little bit of back and forth, but we're ready. We're making good progress here. So picking up from there, the next step, in this is to figure out how to document this. So see, I've got my agreements. I'm going to move to the next step. This is a document builder page. And what it's done is it's just pulled all my notes over. All those notes of things that were agreed, it just dumped into that middle column. But now I'm going to build my agreement around it by going to my library of saved clauses. So I pulled a clause in from my library, a little bit of editing to put in the name of the actual, this is the child, this refers to the child. So I'm going to put that name in. And I think there's another clause I need here. We're just building a summary of the terms, not a definitive agreement. So I need my preserved language about this being non-binding until replaced by a formal agreement. Okay, so that's my preamble kind of paragraphs. Now I'm going to go to work down here. Now you could just work on your notes in this editor, get them right, and then with a single click, copy everything in there, and then you go pull up a template from your library, a predetermined form, and drop the actual language in there. So what I'm showing you is just the way we would build it, but you get just to give you the idea. So I've grabbed another clause. I'm going to take some of the language from my notes now and build it into the clause the way it should be. And this is just, I'm just doing this to give you an idea of how this could work pretty efficiently. Each of those blocks there are 3 blocks on our term builder too, and they can all be copied in a single click and then pasted into like a Word document. And there is a link to go get your templates right here if I were to scroll down on this page. So that's the next step in the process, is building your agreement, whether it's a summary memorandum of agreement or it's a definitive settlement agreement from whether it's from a template or hand built out of clauses and new text in this document builder. So okay, now we're at the follow-up stage, and there are a couple things about follow-up. One is getting paid. So we were not able to find a billing system we liked, so we built this ourselves. So this is the list of billables. This is build time, basically. That could be kept by the counter. There is a timer in that note board. I'm now going to build my invoice by dropping those billables into my, I'm going to select all of them. And the billables, like I said, are just block time. I'm applying a rate. As you can see, I'm adding one here for service. I'm going to pick my rate type and my discounted rate for prep time. 0.8 hours, which I fat-fingered and deleted. The work description that I put in here will go into onto the face of the invoice. You'll note up above there that the billable parties are being split 50-50. That's it's defaults to a pro rata split, but you can adjust to a customer negotiated to split anytime you want. Gives you a last look at all the information, verifying before you send it. You've got all your billable items. In this case, I'm going to assume that I got paid in advance. As you'll see there, advance fee balance, $1,800. So I'm going to go apply that. That's on account. So I'm going to apply that against this bill. And I'm going to do the same thing for Tom. Exact same process since it's being split 50-50. Tom also paid in advance. Now I have predetermined things like billing terms, 30 days net, due upon receipt, whatever. I have also pre-built the text that'll appear on the memo here, you can see on the this memo. And then I've predetermined the email language that will go. With that click, once again, our system, ADR Notable, has generated an email to each of the parties that contains that invoice as an attachment. And it's formatted, it has space for telling people how to remit payment. We partner with Stripe, so if you want to use it, our credit card processing service, you can sign up for a Stripe account. No fee from us. Stripe charges a small fee for processing the payment. And again, this will also go into, for at the firm level, you can look at your firm billables all in a block. You can see if they've violated their payment due terms, whether it's net 15, net 30, so forth. You can, with a click, send a polite reminder that you have pre-prepared the language for, and so forth. And when you get paid, you just come in and apply payment, and it generates a zero balance invoice, which can be sent as a receipt for payment. So there's a lot going on in this because we had to worry about getting paid in advance, still having an overdue component or an additional due component, timing of payment. It'll hold up to 5 rates for any one billing professional. So you can do, we basically set it up as 3 flat rates: full case flat rate, half day flat rate, full day flat rate, and then 2 variable hourly rates if you choose. So we really have tried to kind of accommodate every format and every component of billing that we had heard about. There, we can adjust credit, we can apply a discount, either as a percentage or a flat amount. You can apply a discount to one of the parties and not the other, if for whatever reason you might do that. It is a very flexible billing system. And then my last step in this, in the sort of the follow up, is the sort of what do we do with our record keeping? And we created the secure delete function. So here I'm going to check both my notes, any documents I uploaded. I can either schedule it to delete in the future, which we recommend, with a click. So a lot of, we know that a lot of our users delete all of their confidential information at the conclusion of a matter. So we made that easy. Everything that was in the uploaded document folders for that case will be deleted as assigned by that date. And all of their notes will be, the note board will be cleared on that date. There is a folder in every case. If you want to keep something and protect it from the delete function, you just save it in the retained documents folder, which is automatically created every time you open a case. So you might want to create or keep your retainer agreement or your letter of engagement, maybe the final agreement of the parties, if that's what you want to keep. Or of course, you don't have to use this. You don't have to delete things. We are happy to store them for you. And they are stored, as I mentioned, in the cloud. So that's our staircase, right? That's our stair steps. I just want to add that a few other things about our product. We have additional features for managing a firm of neutrals, like there's a front-end database where you can put all kinds of information about your neutrals, and it's searchable. So if you have a large firm and you need to find a neutral who is a fluent Spanish speaker and has construction law expertise, there is a searchable database that allows you to rapidly identify that individual. It also, you can put in links to your individual mediators or neutrals calendars, so you can access their calendar if they've shared it with you right from that database. So you can not only see that you've got the right person, but you can see that person's availability quickly as well. We have back-end data extraction. So you can take a look at a body of cases, either as an individual mediator or across a firm of neutrals, to look at things like what kinds of cases. We have a categorization of case that I didn't focus on, but when you set up a case, you can identify what kind of case it is. Is it construction? Is it family law divorce? Is it parenting? And so forth. That there are a number of categories that you can use, and then you can extract data later to say how many of those kinds of cases did I do over the period of time. You can look at how many hours were billed in various types of cases or by name of mediator. So there's a whole bunch of flexible ways to extract data back out of the system that is anonymized. It's not going to get you into any particular case. ADR Notable also continues to add features on a regular basis. That note board you saw that I had configured initially with just issues, and then I added the proposals column. Some people routinely use columns, but they put, for instance, husband, proposals, and wife as the 3 columns. One of the features we just released is that you can reconfigure the note board and then save that as a template. So maybe you have one structure of the way you want to take notes for divorce cases. You have another structure for the way you want to take notes for an arbitration matter. For instance, I just used myself the product in an arbitration matter back from my prior life as an airline person. It was a basic breach of contract case, and I used the middle column. I set it up before the hearing to identify the elements of proof that the plaintiff would have to prove to win, then the elements of the affirmative defense asserted by the defendant. And then the left-hand column was plaintiff, right-hand column was defendant. There is a lock button so that when I was taking notes, I could just lock all of my notes to go into the plaintiff's column until I released the lock. And then I could drag and drop my notes of the testimony or exhibits that came in on top of the element of proof to which it applied. So that by the time I was done with both sides of the case, the center column was a full map of how my notes at least showed that the evidence had come in. So, and I can save that configuration, my arbitration configuration, to always come back to that with plaintiff, elements of proof, defendant as my note structure. So that's the basics. There's a lot. This is a lot like kind of trying to demonstrate the features of Word, Microsoft Word in 1 hour. There's a lot that you can do right away. It's very intuitive. It's very straightforward. And then there's increasing depth and more toys, more tools, more features that you can add. And we, as I mentioned, we add things to it on a regular basis. We have an in-house development staff. We work in 2-week sprints. We take feedback from our users, small adjustments, and then we're always working on at least one major project. Current major project is an API to move the data out of our billing system into QuickBooks so that you can manage your entire firm.
Fantastic. Wow,
so that's it. That's ADR Notable.
It's just amazing. It's really, really incredible what you've built. So I want to open it up and see what questions people have for Gary. So please, if anybody has any questions, comments, don't hesitate to ask right now.
I have a question.
Please, call him.
Okay, it's cool. First of all, it was a really great demonstration. Amazing. I think it was well worth getting you to go through it. And you answered one of the questions before. I was wondering if it integrated with QuickBooks. A couple of questions, if you don't mind. One, where's your server located?
Yeah, so we're in the Azure Microsoft Cloud. And as you probably know, most of the cloud services allow you to specify where your servers are. At the moment, the only servers we have are in the US. We've had contact from a firm in Northern Ireland that may drive us to actually clone the software and open another branch in Europe to keep us from having to transfer data back and forth across the Atlantic. And the same thing is happening. And I'm not quite sure about the log yet, but we have a couple users already in Canada. I just attended the ADR Institute of Canada conference last week, and people were asking that question. I'm not sure if we need to do that same thing in Canada, or if North America is adequate for Canadian law purposes. So I need to look into that a little bit more.
Sorry, Gary, I'm Canada. You met, I think, my colleague and friend Richard Moore at
I did.
So we
exactly.
were talking about, but yeah, I mean, this was one of the issues with Zoom at first. There are differences in Canadian US law, and so right. Zoom has a Canadian server as well. And one other question.
If that keeps going, the answer is it's not very expensive for us to basically clone the software, tell Microsoft we need an instance of this in Canada, and then they commit and certify that the data is not leaving the jurisdiction.
Thank you. One more question, then I'll let others. Sure. I understand from chatting with Richard that this system can be used in training as well.
Thanks for asking that. Yeah. So you saw the checklist feature, right? What we've done is we've now started working aggressively with trainers, and we go to them and say, listen, send us the materials that you provide your trainees, and let us work together, and we will configure a custom library. So we have a full library function where you can just build out folders like for a firm, right? You could keep firm templates and model model clauses, and then checklists, whether they're process-oriented checklists or reminders of the training. So we do work with trainers. We configure this custom library, and then we basically give control over that library, access to that library back to the trainer. And we do that for free because we assume that anyone they invite to it will want to then subscribe to ADR Notable to continue using that. But the idea is they go through the training and then they adopt ADR Notable to run their practice, and the materials they were just trained on are arrayed right there at their fingertips for their use, whether it's the checklist to remind you how to break an impasse, or a proposed standard form that the trainer provided them. And then back in their library, there may be articles or what I call deep learning, things you're not going to use in the moment, but things that you may want to refresh yourself on over time from the trainer. So all of that gets arrayed in the library. And currently, we're actually loading Susan Guthrie's materials, most in Guthrie. Right now, we work with the Lodestar Center at Arizona State University, Mediation Training Institute in Florida, and of course, Ohio State University clinical program. I see in the chat question about a subscription.
Pricing from Lucia,
Yeah, we actually will allow you to use the platform in any of three ways. You can buy it, literally buy the case. So you pay a one-time fee and you open one case. That fee is $20. It's $19.99 if you ask my marketing people, but it's $20 when I talk about it. It is available on a monthly subscription for $29.99 or $30 a month. And it is available on an annual subscription that basically you take 30 times 12 and deduct 10%.
Great. What about multilingual support, Gary?
So we're not there yet. We've started working on French because of we've actually kind of gotten into Canada. We adjusted a couple of things as soon as we got a couple of Canadians. We realized things like our zip code windows for addresses weren't working. So we've adjusted that where you can click international and it converts those to open text fields. And we're looking now into what it takes to actually convert the labels and so forth to another language. Great.
Any last questions for Gary? What's your email address, Gary, so people can reach you after that?
I'll put it in the chat. I saw somebody raise their hand about a question.
Please.
Yeah, I did have
my email address.
I did have one question, and that was what happens for support if you have someone that signs up for your subscription, but they can't figure out some portion of it as you're learning it? Do you have either training or support services?
Yeah, that's a great question. So several things that can happen there. One is we're building out a really extensive YouTube channel that has less than 10-minute how-to videos on a variety of topics, both getting started, just getting up and running, and then specific tools like the noteboard or whatever. Second is at the top of every single page in the product, there's a help button. It will do one of two things. It'll allow you to access, again, a very extensive help library that's in a separate product. It's very well, it's keyword searchable and it's very well organized. You can probably find the answer to your question there. If not, in that same help button, there's a way to send us an email message that sends a ticket to us that's monitored, and we'll get back to you.
Great, thank you.
Fantastic. Well, Garrett, I want to respect your time. We're at the hour here. Any last comments you'd like to share? I just want to say thank you so much for sharing this demo. Thank you for all your hard work on this product. As I say, I think it is the most powerful platform for mediators to manage their caseloads online. So I
appreciate that.
Please.
So I'm just happy to try and help. That's my goal. As I said, I didn't think I could contribute very well by being a mediator, so this is what I did instead. So.
Well, I'll also say, mediate.com for a long time, I was proud of Mediate because we were the ones who were at all the conferences. We always had the booths. And you've exceeded even us, Gary. It's amazing. Every ADR, every mediation conference, I am so proud. You've really demonstrated your commitment to the field, and I want to applaud you for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That's very kind, Colin. Coming in from you, it means a lot too.
Well,
Oh,
all right.
okay.
So with that, thank you very much, Gary. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for your attention.
Yeah, please. And I'll post the recording later for the folks who weren't able to make it. And please join us for the rest of Cyber Week. Take a look at the agenda. There's a lot of great sessions. Gary, you set a high bar, but we got a lot of other people. So
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
thanks so much. Take care, everybody. Have a good day.